Social justice means applying the law equally to all people. But in practice, that doesn't always happen. I'm John Gonzalez. I'm here with my law partner, Jack DeRora. We practice law. We seek social justice. On this show, we reveal the conflict between the two.
You know, for a while, it was just us in the office over a cup of coffee talking about the news of the day. With social justice issues dominating our culture, our focus became how do we, as lawyers, make a difference?
And now it's not just us. We have back with us Josh Koskoff. We spoke with him about his lawsuit against Remington in the last time we met, and we wanted to talk about the people that don't believe that there are school shootings, and especially did not believe there was the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting. Welcome back, Josh.
Thank you. It's good to be back with you guys.
I imagine these are the same people who don't believe in the Holocaust or that Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. They gotta be.
Good guess. I haven't done a survey, but same concept, I guess, only probably a step further. And
now, your firm wasn't the only firm that sued Alex Jones. Is that correct?
That is correct. There was a lawsuit brought in Texas by some of my clients in the Sandy Hook case, and then there was our lawsuit in Connecticut. In the Texas case, there were 4 plaintiffs, or two couples basically, and up in Connecticut there were 16 plaintiffs.
And did you did you try your case and get to a verdict?
Yes.
And I guess to go right to the end of that, what, if anything, have you been able to collect on your verdict?
Not much yet. There's a number of things that I'm sure your listenership will be familiar with, and appeals. The verdict is the first step maybe towards a final judgment somewhere along the line, but it's got to go through appeals, and a case of this nature has raised a number of appeals. The Connecticut appellate court affirmed effectively, and the Connecticut Supreme Court denied cert, and there's a petition for cert at the U.S. Supreme Court. And at the same time, another difficulty is, as I'm sure folks are aware of, is in some cases the collecting the judgment, or even a portion of the judgment, can be difficult, especially if it's against an individual versus, a corporate or heavily insured entity.
Mr. Jones wasn't the only person that you sued, though. How were the other defendants tied in?
Well, they were, for lack of a better word, I guess, either they were associate shell corporations in some cases, associate business to InfoWars, or they were associate people to Alex Jones, so individuals. At the end of the day, there was a lot of back and forth about whether an entity called Free Speech System, what it was, whether it was a holding company or what other type of company it was. But really, at the end of the day, it was all about Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones and InfoWars are effectively, for all intents and purposes, one and the same. So it was really about his conduct and about their business model.
In your pleadings, you did a nice job of describing this, I guess, facade that Jones has on his podcast. And that is, he makes it look like it's really a credible news source. Why don't you talk about that and the stuff that he was offering?
Yeah, that's a great observation, because one of the difficulties I had is the idea that the jury was going to say to themselves, why would anybody listen to this guy, right? This guy's a joke, and would dismiss the claims accordingly and not believe that he would be so persuasive. But is very skilled at communicating and building a relationship with his listenership. So if you're in the 90% of people who thinks, or I would say knows, that Alex Jones is full of BS, that's fine. But if you're the 10% who look at him as the Walter Cronkite, I might be dating myself, of the, or Edward R. Murrow, or some arbiter of the truth, and everybody else is part of the deep state or lying, that is an incredibly powerful position to be in. 10% of America, which is his estimated, since he estimated it, we know that's probably not true, but a big chunk of America, enough of millions of people, treat this guy's words as the gospel. And he has that kind of, he's a charismatic person. That's all there is to it. He has that ability to make it sound like he's talking for certain people. I mean, not me, but enough people that believe in him at a gut level, such that they will buy his products and think that they are going to be to live forever, or that their underground bunker is never going to get destroyed, and things like that.
Well, every charlatan, by definition, has to be persuasive, right?
Absolutely.
You wonder why people like that can't use that awesome power for good, right? Well, maybe there are some that do that, but
it's simple, Gonzo. Good isn't profitable.
That may be. I, for one, never did listen or pay attention to him. I was obviously very happy to see the lawsuit, which basically was a defamation, violation of right to privacy. I mean, unlike the case against Remington, you were on pretty solid legal grounds, right?
Well, yes, especially because he was defaulted. So,
okay.
That was about as solid legal ground. Well, we had to have the default validated or upheld by the appellate court, but this is not going to shock you guys. He was not the most compliant defendant that's ever lived. So, he had multiple opportunities. I mean, the system bent over backwards for him to give him one opportunity at the other to meet his discovery obligations. But it was basically a fait accompli at some point. He just didn't. And so the judge basically, in a very, the judge didn't want to default him. She wanted, but she had no choice because he gave her no choice. There were other kind of hurdles, though. The question is, in today's version of defamation, are you responsible for the conduct of the third parties that, listen to Alex Jones? How much of his, he's reaching, whereas once the public square would reach only as to the dimensions of a public square, not, it's an obvious point to say he's reaching the entire globe in a matter of seconds or milliseconds. And so his reach is exponential to everybody in the world. And that means there are cells, there are Alex Jones cells in grocery stores and libraries and wherever these families go. That's what makes it so unsettling. But it does put to the test some common law restrictions on causation and things like that. True, they were relaxed because of the default. And we never tested, we never really tested a First Amendment defense, which I think would have been pretty easy to overcome here, but nevertheless, we didn't get to that.
Did you put on damages? Did you have your clients on the stand talking to the jury about obviously having to relive the tragedy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this was a really challenging aspect of the case. It was really the case we put on, and you get a difference of opinion, but I don't like to over-expert things. The law, being a trial lawyer, every judges love experts because it gives them cover. And I think people over-expert things in general, but I didn't think that we needed an expert to explain the grief of these families and what it's like to be trolled by a man as opportunistic and pathological as Alex Jones with the following he has. I wanted the jury to hear it from the families themselves, because we can all be experts in what that's like. And so we really had it so that they spoke directly to the jury, no experts saying, "Oh, this makes somebody feel worse." I don't mean to belittle grief counselors, but it's not my style to do that. So it was very effective to hear each one talk about their own experiences. In terms of the shooting, it's also super mindful not to. That's a really strategic or thoughtful decision you have to make. You can't ignore what happened because that would be obvious. It'd be an elephant in the room. On the other hand, if you talk too much about it, there's a saturation point, and then there's the point at which you don't want your jury, you don't want any extra credit or damages for that horrible event. You want it to focus on the conduct and harm afterwards. So we sort of brought it up to a point, just where were they when they heard that? By the way, since he was defending, still we had to prove it happened. So as something that, just to prove that it happened, we had to explain what each person was doing. And I thought turned out to be a very effective way of doing it. It was a challenge, though. It was a challenge.
I bet. Now, did he testify at trial, and were you able to cross-examine him?
Yeah, he did. There was an ongoing sort of bookmaking about whether he'd show up. He would show up to do press conferences outside the courthouse, but then turn around and leave. But he ultimately did testify. My wonderful partner, Chris, who's a former prosecutor, crossed him. I wanted this to be like a prosecution, and I'm way too nice. So I had Chris crossed him, and it was very precision, and it was a wonderful cross, and Alex Jones' true colors showed right in front of the jury. Ironically, he had done this diatribe about how Connecticut was full of a bunch of rich people with private jets. And Chris got out of him, asked him how he got to court. Guess what he took?
A private jet, let me guess.
Yeah, exactly. And he was monetizing the trial. So what would happen is after every day in court, you want some behind the scenes baseball. Every day in court, I go home and we all would. We'd go right to InfoWars, where he put out something really belittling or arrogant or just ridiculous about the day in court, and he'd be selling his stuff in the middle of these hit jobs about what a kangaroo court the Connecticut court was. The next day, we'd have a whole new set of evidence to introduce. So I've never and will never experience anything like that again in my life.
How were his lawyers? I mean, were they embarrassed? Were they apologetic? Or did they just seem like they're on board with him?
I'm a big believer, and I know you guys are too, that everybody deserves a competent, zealous lawyer. And the second you start sort of making exceptions, your integrity starts to suffer a few hits. Having said that, no, I'm kidding. But his lawyer is a very charismatic, well-known lawyer. A lot of Connecticut and known nationally. He's a zealous defense lawyer, and I'll leave it at that. He's a very skilled lawyer, very charming. I like him. I mean,
yeah.
But he's also, if there was one person that if you said who would take this case in Connecticut, I would have said it was him. And, my grandfather got thrown out of the temple because somebody asked him if he would defend Hitler. I think he was just trying to make a point that everybody deserves defense. And he said, yes, of course, he loved throwing bombs like that. And that was it for him in the temple. So I do have a little bit of a soft spot for defending the Alex Joneses of the world.
You hit on something that really interests me: the fact that he was monetizing the trial. In one of your pleadings, you paint this picture that he's not broadcasting all this stuff just because he believes in it fervently. He's actually a snake oil salesman, inducing people with this talk so that he can sell them male enhancements, body armor, all kinds of junk. So it really sounds like it's a purposefully contrived monetary scheme. Am I wrong? And
you're 1,000% right. In fact, his father, who left his apparently left his dentistry practice to join InfoWars, testified at trial that their business models built on Alex Jones building up a belief system between Alex Jones and his audience, and secondly, selling them things and selling them a lot of products. But selling, so it is entirely, and the reason why we argued, and I think proved in court, that he couldn't stop talking about the Sandy Hook case is because of the amount of traffic it drove to his store. And we had, since he didn't give us all his stuff, although he didn't give us all his stuff, he did give us delicious like breadcrumbs to put together to show that when he talked about Sandy Hook, especially when he published certain things, his listenership would go through the roof, and more importantly for him, his sales would go through the roof. So we saw a cause and effect that this was really the linchpin of the meat of the case, where we could literally show he talked about Sandy Hook, that meant more money in his pocket, and it is only about that. I mean, I think the question is whether he believes any of it, versus whether he believes it but also wants to sell you things. I mean, I think he wants to sell you his stuff. That's what he wants, and you cannot underestimate. I mean, you can't underestimate how smart this guy is. He is really smart.
You know,
in my view.
Gonzo and I always debate how politicians can make such bonehead decisions. And it always seems to come down to they don't care, right? Or they're just not being rational. And bringing that over to Jones, certainly you've made it clear he was soulless, right? And depraved. But maybe he's also in that category.
Hard for me to say somebody's. I mean, he's craven and he is greedy, and his whole goal, in my view, I think the evidence supports that it was all about driving, customers to take advantage of them by selling them a bunch of things on promises. Again, they already are trusting you to deliver the news, so they're going to trust you to tell that vaso bead that's going to cause you to live forever has some magical propensities, when all it is beet juice packaged in a really small vial. So I don't really know how to address this other than we've all seen it, whether it's in individuals or maybe you saw it when you were doing defense work, Chrysler, I don't know. The corruptive nature of greed and profit motive, it causes people to lose their way. Causes corporations to lose their way. So I don't know anything about Alex Jones' childhood. My suspicion is the guy just wants a hug, but I can't really explain it.
Well, he wants to make money, and he's, like you said, he's smart enough to probably compartmentalize everything else because money's his motive. And it's incredible because I wonder at the end of the day if he thought, I'll get sued, I'll lose a little bit of money, but in the long run, I'm going to be more popular, I'm going to have more followers, I'm going to sell more. And I don't think it went that way for him, but, maybe it was still a business calculation all in all.
I think, when he first started percolating for over a year, I can't remember, some long amount of time, I kept saying to the families, this guy is going to wither and dry up on the vine. He wants oxygen. The last thing we should do is sue him. I thought he was just going to go away. But he forced our hand, to be honest. I was wrong. I couldn't believe, I guess my faith in human beings never, a little bit on the optimistic side, but I just couldn't believe that he was going to perpetuate it for very long. And I didn't want to do that very thing you just talked about. I didn't want to become the, all attention. What is that? There's no such thing as bad publicity, like, especially for somebody like him. But he didn't go away, and he only kept tearing away at their pain.
Did your case, was it ahead of the other case or behind the Texas case?
Yeah. Well, we tried it after their case.
Okay.
The cases were sort of proceeding somewhat neck and neck for a while. They were interrupted by appeals and different kind of procedural things. And at the end of the day, I can't remember, they went to trial first. Of course, it was also an interesting study in the difference in a Texas state courthouse versus a Connecticut one. Not surprisingly, quite different.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we are sometimes amazed at what we see around the country, and we think about Ohio, in our processes and procedures. Talk a little bit, if you can, about the jury. Oftentimes we're allowed to talk to them after a verdict and, not challenge them in any way, but just to get the feel for what they thought was good, bad, or indifferent. Did you have that opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I think out of respect for the jury, I'll probably go light on this. But I guess what I would say about the jury is that we had a jury, I think, in Connecticut, you tried to 6 jurors. So 6 jurors decide, plus we had 3 or 4 alternates. We had a mix of Republicans and Democrats. Picking a jury in the case was not easy because by the time we go, and, especially in Connecticut, Sandy Hook, within the orbit of Sandy Hook, it was hard to find some people who had no opinion of Alex Jones. And, unfortunately, you guys probably dealt with this when you pick juries for plaintiffs' work. Plaintiffs' jurors are so much more likely to share their biases with you,
Right.
and their humanity, right? Whereas conservative, defense jurors are much more likely to be cagey and close to the vest and not say what you need to get them out for cause. So we lost a lot of jurors who just couldn't wait to tell us how much they hated Alex Jones and how awful it was. But I'm proud of the fact that we were able to, let me just go back. I was mindful of this whole thing, and I know that the defense lawyer's job, he was trying to get one favorable juror, right? He wanted to miss, he knew he wasn't going to be able to pull all 6. So his goal was a mistrial and to find one person. And he kept trying to inject politics in it. And I really wanted to appeal to the jurors' higher calling. And so I referenced some of the jury was too young to get this. But, when we were all together as one, like after 9/11, there was no Democrat or Republican. I was hearkening back to sort of the best of who we are. And the defense just wanted to divide again. He wanted to divide the jury. So, frankly, I thought it was a good, smart strategy by him. I'm not begrudging his strategy. He had to have something, But getting back to it, no, I think that what resonated is, look, this was not a case where where the lawyers had to do much. We just had to make sure that the jurors got to know the families, got to listen to what they went through, and we knew the damages would take care of themselves.
So you needed 6 in Ohio. We get 8 on our juror. We need 6 of 8, so we need 3/4 of them. But you needed all 6. Is that what you do?
Yeah, we needed a unanimous verdict, and I was a little bit worried because I'm a plaintiff's lawyer. I'm worried about every little thing. I was slightly worried about them getting hung up on the damages and coming and saying that they're impossibly hung up. So I did argue for listening to each other and compromising and finding a middle ground on the numbers because I didn't want to have the case.
Right.
It was a unique situation. It was a good situation for a plaintiff, and of course, the longer they were out, the more convinced I was, as the senior statesman of the team, that it was not going to be a good verdict. So I shared this wisdom just in time to make me look like an idiot. But
hey, we're running out of time, but I'd like you to address one final thing, and that is there were some severe ramifications from what Alex Jones was broadcasting in terms of him actually fomenting hate and discontent, and people being harassed in public. Spend a minute on that, if you would.
Yeah, I mean, this is not amateur hour when it comes to defamation. It's not just it actually in today's defamation market and marketplace of ideas, defamation has such a reach, and that you're going to capture a lot of people who are probably otherwise unstable as well, and actually can get people to do things that otherwise they might not do, like approach a family at their doorstep and demand to see a gravesite of their child because Sandy Hook wasn't real. Like tell people and go up to people in the street, Sandy Hook families, and just saying, how could you do it? How could you pretend you had a daughter? You sick, whatever. Like, of course, the constant onslaught online. And at the Vicky Soto, for example, race, which was a race that was named after the hero teacher who died defending her kids at Sandy Hook, one of Alex Jones's listeners showed up and approached, the family and was in a very aggressive way, was arrested. It's so unsettling. And look, we know what words can do. We all lived through January 6th. In today's world, defamation is magnified to such a degree that that we have no analogs, and it is killing us. It's just killing us. I think one thing that I've come to recently, as somebody who's had to deal with sort of the Second Amendment-ish, is that kills people. Yeah, that kills people demonstrably, the interpretation of the Second Amendment. But I would add that the interpretation of the First Amendment and the First Amendment itself, applied without any adjustment to today's communication superhighway, is killing us.
Well said. Hey, Josh, thank you for talking to us, and thank you for the work you do for your clients. They're, I think, fortunate to have such a compassionate and eloquent advocate for them, and we really do appreciate your time.
Thank you, Gonzo. I appreciate what you guys are doing and bringing social justice to light.
Josh, thanks again. We really enjoyed having you on the show. Gonzo, before we sign off, I want to continue with our segment, How Stupid Is This? Are you game?
I am.
Okay, so a few days ago, the Department of Justice sent down Todd Blanche, President Trump's former personal attorney, to talk with Ghislaine Maxwell, who was partner in crime with Jeffrey Epstein in the pedophile ring that he managed a few years before he died by suicide. Now, what triggered this trip to the federal penitentiary where Miss Maxwell is serving time? Well, it was the DOJ not releasing the Epstein files, right? Somehow the DOJ not releasing the Epstein files results in Todd Blanche talking to Ghislaine Maxwell. How do the two tie together? They don't, right? There's no connection. And what's to be gained? Well, is Todd Blanche going to gain some information from Ghislaine Maxwell in exchange for immunity? How credible would that information be if you're going to use her to try a case? Hardly. Who's going to believe Ghislaine Maxwell? Is this going to result in Trump pardoning Ghislaine Maxwell? The MAGA crowd may have thought that pardoning everybody who participated in the January 6th insurrection was a good idea, but from what I'm seeing in the news, they'll be outraged that Ghislaine Maxwell gets pardoned. So all this proves is that this was just a big diversion to avoid a problem. I don't get it. I mean, how stupid is all this?
Well, I have to disagree with you. I think it's genius on Trump's part.
Oh, you do?
I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because typical Trump, nothing's going to happen. It's a big deal. They're going to go in and talk to her. And like you say, there's only a few ways this is going to end, right? She gives up the ghost. She doesn't say anything. Now she wants immunity. They're thinking about what they should do. It's never going to end. So for Trump, it's just a free ride. It's a distraction, but it's a free distraction because they're never going to get her to come out and testify because they're never going to give her immunity. So it's just something that's going to be talked about ad nauseum from now on. And it is ridiculous. I agree.
Enough said. Our thanks to WOSU and our sound engineer, Dalton Jones. If you like what you've heard, tell a friend. We want this to be more than just about us. We want it to be about all of us. We'll be back in another week or so with another social justice issue. Until then,